How's it going, guys? It's the original Josh here. I'd like to start off this video with a little bit of a disclaimer that not everything I'm going to say might be agreeable for some people. It might not make people happy. If you're easily offended, or if some of the things that I say you dislike, feel free to comment down below and voice your opinion, of course. So, let's start off today's video. I feel like the PC community is failing to keep in trend with people. I state this because a few years ago, I got into PC gaming, and I was in a community known as the Low Spec Gaming Community. It was ran by a man named Alex, and he would show users how to get the most performance at the time for their hardware, showing that Intel Atoms could even play Half-Life 2 and some other things. Back then, I had a Toshiba laptop with a Pentium, and I played games like Gmod, Stalker, Fallout, and so on. That community doesn't really exist anymore due to Alex stepping away, but I feel it also has to do more with, at the time, well, older technologies were more supported, and they were not really as shamed for people having low-end hardware, and more people offered advice. So, at that time, I was never really made fun of for having such old technology. Even my big leap forward was an i7-860 and an HD 5000 series card, if I recall correctly. And even then, I was content. And so were the people I was talking to. But it feels like you can't even own anything that isn't AM4 and up. I own a Ryzen 5 1500X and an RTX 2060 with 24 gigabytes of RAM. And even then, I've caught flack by owning that. I was asking some questions in a certain community, and I was getting flack for recommending somebody with a lower budget like me an Oculus Rift CV1. I stated that if their desire to get into VR was more than their patience, that the CV1 used is usually cheap, and that they're not bad headsets. But to be careful of the flex cable that goes along the back of the headset, because they break, leading you to not have sound. But that a Bluetooth headset, like headphones, or an aux cable would fix that. I then got lambasted for recommending such old hardware. How out of date it was, and then I was accused of being unhappy with it. That if I had to defend my decision, that therefore it was not a good decision. Because they couldn't even grasp that some people find 90 Hz with 1080p in each eye to be perfectly fine for most VR applications. That most people outside of the West and well-off countries have less budget overall, like Brazil, where the person I was recommending the headset came from. But it didn't matter. I was wrong, and I was always going to be wrong in their eyes. This aggressive behavior doesn't attract new people. It doesn't attract anyone from consoles to move over to PC. Though, not always, as there are two British guys that come to mind for low-spec gaming. And Linus did release his new video on lossless scaling, a very cool technology, by the way. The reaction to lower-end hardware in the PC community isn't much different to the reaction of Linux users when new people ask for help, that being a snobby, bull-headed, know-it-all personality. They act like they're spoon-feeding information when they answer simple questions, just to help out the new guy switching from Windows to Linux. And if you don't believe me, you can join any Reddit server or any Discord server, and you will be wrung out for asking such basic questions. So, what's the point of this video? It's about those with lower budgets those who want to get into PC gaming and are trying because their console either isn't doing it anymore or because there are games they want to try. I was talking to somebody in a War Thunder server, and he had only an FM1 generation APU, that being a CPU with integrated graphics. And he was playing War Thunder with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and with the lowest settings, and his CPU was only 2 cores and 2 threads. I was dumbfounded. I felt bad, moreover, but it's people like him with old specs who can't afford new ones that I feel for. He comes from more Baltic, Slavic areas. I recommended that he try lossless scaling due to the AI benefits of frame generation and at least the upscaling. I also recommended this to my older brother, who doesn't really care about the PC community, but he wanted to try games like BeamNG and Ready or Not. He has my old computer, pretty much, and those specs are just a Xeon 1245 with a V3, 16 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM, and a GTX 1650, and he was content with that. But if there's a game that he's struggling with and I'm not there to help him, I know that the PC community will just drag him through the mud for these specs, instead of offering tweaks to settings or to INI files like how there was when I was a kid. Continuing with the War Thunder guy, I did the conversion rate for his country and did some online digging, and I found some cheap graphics cards that are without the need for a separate power connector and with GDDR5 VRAM. I won't specify what, due to me not wanting to cause a possible GPU price hike for that specific card like there was for the RX 550, GTX 750, and so on. But I had made an offhand remark that the GT 1030 4GB GDDR5 could be something to look into if that's in his budget. And somebody who had nothing to do with the conversation had butted in and stated the GT 1030 is an e-waste, and why would I recommend that to him? Reminder, I've already recommended that he gets a new CPU, at least within the FM1 platform, and that, he's very clearly going to be bottlenecked by his CPU if he gets anything bigger and better. So, I had recommended the GT 1030 to him because back then, to me, and to anybody who remembers the low spec gaming YouTube channel, the GT 1030 was a powerhouse of its time. I would have recommended the GTX 1650 or 1630, but remember, his budget is slim, and the graphics cards that I recommended him were like $23. So, what's the conclusion? We need more acceptance for the PC hardware and VR community, like within the PC and VR community, if we're ever going to get an increase for the total of PC gamers. Not everyone wants to spend 1K on a gaming PC. In my country, 1K would get you maybe a mid-tier AM4 system with an RTX 3070, which to a lot of people nowadays, people would scoff at. Some people want to buy those, LGA 2011 X99 combos because it's like $130 for RAM, CPU, and motherboard. And, that's a really good deal for somebody who needs or wants high cores with alright gigahertz, like 8 cores, 16 threads at maybe 3.0, 2.5 gigahertz. And, that's really good for them, because it's in their budget and it's cheaper than, say, an AM4 motherboard. Because it is. Most of the time you can't even get an AM4 motherboard for less than $100. You usually be spending at least $150. And why would they spend $150 when they could get an entire motherboard, RAM, and CPU combo for like $150? But to anybody that is also in that market, they'd also be looking at like an RTX 3060M, which is like those conversion kit ones, the ones with only one HDMI port. Those are really cool, by the way. I don't know anything about them. I've seen a few videos on them, and I think they're pretty neat. And they're good budget cards for the money, especially within my country. You can't even get a 3060 for the price that they are. But my main point is, to anybody watching, I want you to comment your experiences on PC help boards or servers, and write down your specs and what things you did to boost your performance. I'm asking this because there is a very, very large market for low-end performance, and not a lot of people are low-end PC high performance, and there's not a lot of people actually trying to cash into that market. And I'm just trying to point out that, the majority of people have low-end hardware. Well, it's been lovely playing with you all, and until next time.